Okay, so welcome to the Digibois Bookclub podcast. Today we're going to be reading Molester Man, the oddly titled, the oddly titled. Yeah, we're gonna do person introductions after I introduce the book. The oddly titled, sort of webcomic doujin thing by a guy named Yoko, who went on to do Masturbation Master Kurosawa, which is probably his most famous work. I am Jacob, and I am joined by
I am the squid.
Mr. Squid
and
and
student of Ethereum.
all right. So I think we're leading into this. This is the first episode. We're covering chapters 1 through 5 of the manga. It's right up until Kansai and Molester Man are sitting outside of his apartment waiting to get back in, for those of you wanting to read along.
That was good.
But before we jump into the main topic I want to talk about, I just wanted to touch briefly on the art and what you guys thought of it, because it's the first thing that people are going to see. And the story is titled Molester Man, and it does look like a fucking doujin, so it can be off-putting.
There's a lot of dialogue, and there are pages where there's literally no art, which threw me off.
Yeah. I really enjoy the art. It's super scribbly, and I find that adorable. And everyone in it is really cute, and I like it.
Yeah, I like the art style.
Yeah, the environments, I think, they're really bare bones, is what I noticed. He barely draws environments at all. And I think that's basically fine. It's a character story, and the faces, I noticed, are extremely expressive.
Yeah.
And the sketchy art style, I think it lends itself very well to visual comedy. So you can have these super exaggerated expressions. You can have art style shifts. He does that a lot. He plays with, upgrading the art style and then sometimes downgrading it as well to emphasize a joke. So yeah, I think the art, I think it can be initially off-putting, but I think it fits the tone of the manga well. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's like
overall.
my lesbian or my private report. That one manga about the person who's depressed and hires a lesbian prostitute.
Yeah, my lesbian experience with depression, or
yeah, whatever it's called.
Anyways, but now that we're done with that, the main topic I wanted to talk about for this episode is planned versus unplanned conversation, because I think Molester Man, the character, is someone who, when it starts off, is not experienced with social interactions like at all. He was a complete loner in high school, and as a result, he overthinks things. He's someone who likes to meticulously plan conversations out in advance. He wants to never say the wrong thing. And I think that as we see him interact with more and more people, that starts to change. But that, I think, is the key disconnect in his relationship with misunderstanding, which will eventually end up being, doomed, as we find out at the climactic part of this arc. So just to touch on that, you see that initially in their face-to-face conversations, he's very awkward, but the moment he gets home and he has the ability to text her, all of a sudden his responses are very polite, well thought out, thoughtful, and they're incredibly long.
Yeah,
and
I totally relate to being like that. I tend to be a little bit more awkward in social situations, but like when it comes to like texting it or online, and I have a moment to think, I'll still impulsively type shit, but I'm a lot better with it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is the immediate difference when that interaction isn't with misunderstanding. It's with Kansai. Is that how you pronounce it? Does anyone know?
Yeah, Kansai.
I believe that's how.
Like the Kansai, like having a Kansai accent. That's what it is.
Yeah. I know. But I think I remember there was this page it's one of those all dialogue pages, like Student says,
Mm-hmm.
where you have the text he's sending to Misunderstanding and the ones she's replying with, and Kansai's texts on the same page, and they're right next to each other, and the juxtaposition between those is absolutely enormous in the type of conversation that's going on.
Yeah, it's a very interesting visual storytelling way. I don't even know if it was completely on purpose for it to be like that, but if it was, like, I totally understand why he did it, and I think in general this comic kind of talks about how you act depending on who you're talking to. Like, the shit he says when he's talking in his form is way different than when he's actually talking to a character.
When he's... Are you cutting out, or are you just stuck for words? I couldn't hear you after...
I think you cut out.
Okay. Well, anyways, I think the reason I wanted to highlight that is because Molester Man doesn't initially see Kansai as a love interest, and the whole time he's looking at Misunderstanding, he sort of views her as it's a sort of, every conversation is a sort of attempt to further their shallow, what is ultimately a shallow relationship, because he's interested in her as a result of her looks, not really as a result of who she is. And as a result, they're sort of stilted and practical feeling, whereas with Kansai, it's conversation for the sake of conversation, and as a result, it flows very naturally.
Conversation works a lot less when you try and force it.
Yeah, and I think that's highlighted as well in his initial exchange with Mr. Glasses, in the phone call, where it happens immediately after he's been talking to Misunderstanding, and it's all when it's with Misunderstanding, it's all a very practical conversation about when they're going to meet up, what they're going to do when they meet up, and then it goes to Mr. Glasses, and we're just watching Bakatono, and they start talking about it, and it feels very natural. It feels like this is something that could result in a friendship, right? It's something he's genuinely interested in, and it's conversation for its own sake. And that's also sort of foreshadowing, because what ends up being a major foundation for his relationship with Kansai, practically all the conversations they have throughout the manga are about comedy TV shows. I think that it's important that this manga is willing to dwell on the minutia of, like, and willing to look at something as narrow as Bakatono and make that the focal point of someone's relationship, because that's really, in my experience, what relationships are, right? Like, they aren't these big grand gestures. I mean, those are fine too, but they're the ability to, like, spend a day with someone and just entertain yourselves by being yourselves and talking about stuff you're interested in, carrying on a conversation. Squid, you have something to say?
It's because when it's like meeting, it's easier when you're meeting someone for the first time or trying to establish, like, some type of connection to relate to a shared interest, which is why when you go to, like, an anime convention, you immediately are able to connect with everyone there on some level because you all have the same interests and you can just talk about that. So it's easier.
Yeah, it's a jumping off point.
Yeah. So it's easier to start those relationships because you have that.
Yeah, and I think he's trying to dig for that with Misunderstanding because he wants to be in a relationship with her.
Yes.
But, he plans to talk about, like, the Iraq War, right? He goes in with the idea that that's something I'm going to talk about. But it's not necessarily something he's really interested in. It's just, this is something
that's everybody knows.
Everyone knows, right? It's current. He thinks a normie will know about it. So he's going to bring it up and he's going to try to carry on this conversation. Whereas when he sits down with Kansai, I think it's really telling that she's the one who brings up, "Did you watch Bakatono last night?" And he's immediately like, right on it.
Yeah.
And
I like
the
that.
other. Go ahead.
I like that old Japanese comedy groups are the reason people can be friends in this comic so far.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's an interesting place to start. Do you guys know anything about Bakatono and what it is?
I know very little.
Literally never heard of it.
I know very little. You've probably somewhat heard because they've been referenced in a lot of things. They're very they basically invented the comedy duo, honestly. The whole, that whole Japanese idea of comedy. Where it's two people. But
it's something, again, I know practically nothing about it. I know that the host got kicked off for like being a weird sex pervert. That's just about it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can really feel, even if you don't know anything about it, you can really feel that he cares about it and that she cares about it, and that sort of plays out in their conversation. I just want to derail what I'm saying for a minute to ask you guys, that's a pun, by the way, to ask you guys about Train Man. Have you ever heard of Train Man?
No.
Train Man, I think, was sort of the it's the other reference point for this story. It was a very similar story where an otaku saved a girl from a stalker, so kind of inverted. And as a result, ended up getting in a relationship with her.
You know what? Actually, I have heard of that. I have heard of that.
Yeah, and I feel like I've read a little bit of that, and it felt very different because that story, while similar in setup, was focused much more on the like I said, the grand gestures, the ideal romance rather than the minutia. And I felt like that's why it didn't work nearly as well as a romance for me, because that for me has very little to do with what actually is a relationship, right? Those moments are fleeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I get that.
It's those conversations that last for pages and pages about practically nothing that are what actually constitute the actual relationship. But we do get a grand gesture at the end of this segment. Kansai being willing to sacrifice her night to pull an all-nighter. She's clearly exhausted by the end of it, to keep Molester Man company. And
yeah, that was very sweet. Even though I don't like Kansai.
You don't like Kansai?
No.
You need to elaborate.
Guess who I would date in this manga? Guess.
Lolly.
No. Absolutely.
Molester Man.
Yes! Bingo, you won. I would only date Molester Man.
Yeah, that makes sense.
My last note is I want to marry Molester-san.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because you're obviously coming at it from a very different perspective from me, and
yeah.
I'm straight, so
yeah, I'm a gay guy. If you couldn't tell, I'm a gay man.
I'm like 50% straight.
So we have a variety of different perspectives. I think that that would be interesting because I mean, Molester, initially as a person I don't really like him much, but I definitely identify with him.
Absolutely.
My issue is none of the characters have actually grabbed me that much yet. Like Molester Man is the one who has interested me the most, but like a lot of the other characters just didn't really give me personally something to attach to and empathize with.
I think with Lolly and Misunderstanding, that's somewhat intentional on the part of the author, right? They feel especially Lolly, he just glosses over all of her sections. Like, remember, there's this scene at the cafe where he says, "Oh, Lolly came over to talk, but let me skip over that." Now that's foreshadowing. That's going to be relevant later.
This also feels like a very not normie guy trying to get along with normie people.
Yeah, and with misunderstanding, obviously, it's supposed to, the fact that she doesn't feel relatable or particularly interesting, like she's just a basic normie, right? Basic normie bitch, is because it's told from the perspective of Molester Man. It's literally ripped from some 2-channel threads that he wrote.
Yeah, I really want to talk about how that this was a thing. I find that so interesting.
It is interesting, and the fact that hip culture keeps coming up in it is something.
Yeah, and he's really very disingenuous with the hip culture. He's like, I'm just wearing some Yuliko clothes, which, if you don't know, Yuliko is basically the the Hollister of Japan.
Yeah, he keeps talking about fashion, and I think that's, they bring that. He keeps referencing it, and it seems insignificant, but they bring it back around in that shopping scene, and it does end up paying off. To a degree, and you were gonna say something.
From that, you get that he knows how to dress himself, and he knows what looks good and doesn't, but he just doesn't get into it. Like, he's not crazy about it.
Yeah. It still feels to me like that's him trying to fake it, right? Like, he doesn't really care about that stuff, but he gets the impression that misunderstanding at least does, because he's trying to impress her.
Yeah. Again, I really relate with that, because I do that when I'm talking to people at work. I'm not going to be talking about, hey, are you watching the current anime? I'm going to talk about other shit. When I don't talk to the people with my sports. I don't talk to them about, hey, did you hear about PewDiePie? I don't talk about that kind of shit. I talk about the sport or other shit we're doing.
Yeah, I think for anyone with niche interests, the comic comes across as fairly relatable, just because he has so much trouble trying to talk about the stuff he's genuinely interested in.
Yeah, that part is it was what made me gave me something to hook onto with Molester Man.
Yeah, it's hard for him because he thinks that other people will think that he's a creep, right? He owns these snakes.
Yeah, the stereotype of the creepy otaku.
But I think ultimately, and I think this is true in real life for the most part, when he actually talks about it with Kansai, she doesn't think he's a creep, right? No one thinks your hobbies are creepy. You're just kind of self-conscious.
Yeah, she's just like, well, I can tell you really like it, and it's not like you're a bad person, so why should I care about what you like?
Yeah, and she's also, she's part of it is that she's basically perfect for him. She actually displays genuine interest in his, weird niche hobbies. But I think that for most people, even if they aren't interested, they're not gonna judge you maliciously unless they're complete fucking asshats who aren't worth your time, right?
Yeah. I really like the it was like one or two pages of them being in the manga cafe, and they're both reading the manga, and she's getting kind of serious talking about the manga that they're reading, and they're having an actual conversation, and they're going so deep that they're talking about the state of mind of the author, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And I think that, okay, I'm just looking at my notes right now, sorry.
It's okay.
So, Squid, I just want to derail the conversation again
It's okay.
briefly. You said you really like it. You thought all the characters were super cute. What do you guys think of the character designs? Because I think with the girls, some people might struggle to tell them apart. They're all very samey, very sketchy.
Yeah, I wanted to say that they're very plain looking, and I don't know if that's because the artist was trying to go for this is what a real girl looks like.
I think that was the point. That at least that was my read on it.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely right because I think that was on purpose. They're really pretty plain. There's nothing too
Yeah,
special.
but they're still distinct enough. You can tell who they are.
Yeah.
I think the character designs, for me, they tell you enough at a first glance about the character. Like, I look at Misunderstanding and Lolly, and they have these really rounded, derpy eyes. And, they're sort of, like, you learn later on that sort of is very fitting for their characters. I mean, with Lolly, it's probably already immediately obvious. But you look at Kansai and Molester Man, and they have literally much sharper eyes. They're
Well, yeah, that's just kind of a basic of character designing. If you want your character, you should be able to tell something about your character as soon as you see them, even if it's not the full picture, or even if you're trying to like misguide them about who they are. So that's why I also like Molester Man, is that he definitely looks like a kind of molester creepy guy. He needs like peach fuzz or something to really pull it together. but it's so the look fits for him. But when he starts expressing more, you can see that he's just kind of like a goofy, dorky guy, and I really like that.
Yeah.
It is hard, though, I've noticed, to get him to express outside of his own mind, right? He has these massive mood swings inside his head that he never displays outwardly. And I think that's something that's true of a lot of people who are, socially inexperienced or awkward, is they tend not to outwardly display their emotions as much.
No,
I know that.
Yeah, definitely on the inside.
Go ahead,
no, on the inside, in my head, I am an anime, and I'm doing the anime, but on the outside, I'm just like straight-faced.
Yeah, I mean, I really relate with that on a personal level, just because that's always been how I work, right? I feel like I am a very emotional person, but it never shows in my voice, in my face. Everyone always says when they interact with me that I'm extremely muted. And I think that we learn later on that for Molester Man, this is spoilers, but that sort of comes from his upbringing. He has a very stoic father who does not like showing emotions.
Yeah,
He's like this super manly guy.
I like he has like these like his father taught him these like rules of being a man, and it's like so ingrained in him that he kind of does them on impulse, which I find fascinating. Like he just impulsively orders something without really knowing what he's ordering at the restaurant, and then he like immediately regrets his decision. But then it's another rule that he has to eat it. He can't leave anything behind, and he's like crying basically, and but then Misunderstanding is like, you don't have to be like that, and he's like, oh yeah, I don't have to be like that.
Yeah, I relate to that on a personal level, and mostly because my dad was exactly like that. Like he's very stoic, very muted as well, and I think I really picked that up from him. So for me, I mean, this is my second favorite manga of all time. I think that, it's one of those things for me where I feel like this is something that, you read it and you're like, this was made for me. I am the specific target audience.
Yeah.
Even though, obviously, that's all sort of in my head. Okay, I'm just gonna read over my... Oh, I found my next note. Molester Man... One thing I noticed about him is he's immediately suspicious of other people, even of their good qualities.
Oh yeah.
With Kansai, she initiates a conversation with him, and his first reaction to that is, "You fucking whore." he's he's just been so conditioned to not like trust others and believe that other people
trust.
Yeah, that's like, it's
ulterior
like
motives.
it's definitely like people have definitely done that to him before, like like he's had people who were nice to him and he tried to be friends with, but they immediately like turned on his back and, you know, did something to fuck with him, and that's why he's like that. And I like that he like does a mini analysis of like everyone he meets, like even when he first started, like, after the whole situation at the beginning, and he goes to go talk with Misunderstanding, he's like, God, what a fucking bitch. She's so hoity-toity. Like, you know, like get off your, he's like, get off your high horse, you know? Even when she apologizes, she's like, oh, she's just trying to guilt me.
Yeah, and it's the same with Glasses initially. It's the same with practically every character except Lolly, who he just says, you know, you have big tits. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
And then again, you see him trying to, in that conversation at the bar where he's first met Kansai. It's not a bar; it's a restaurant. You see him again trying aggressively to plan his response to Misunderstanding's stalker story, and how immediately that backfires. How he tried to show off his intellectual side by citing all these crime stats, and she just fucking panics and loses her shit. While prior to that and immediately after that, he carries on this, you know, happy, fun conversation with Kansai. And I think that's some really strong foreshadowing. I'm sure you guys all know exactly where this story is ending up, if I had to guess.
Yeah, for the most part, I think I do. There's still just some things I'm a little unsure of. I feel like if I read maybe another chapter or two, then I'll see it. This manga isn't that long. I read these 1 through 5 pretty fast. No, I mean like time it would take for me to read it.
Yeah, I think that it does a really good job at foreshadowing its relationships, at establishing what they're like early on, and even though I think it is somewhat obvious after this chapter in particular, where the story is sort of headed, for me, watching it play out as it does is it warms the cockles of my heart. It's a very wholesome relationship.
Again, the fact that this is all like a real story, I can only assume some little details might be a little exaggerated or just guessed.
Yeah. This whole story reminds me of, and I mentioned it earlier, Lesbian Report, where it's someone telling this story that is incredibly relatable to people.
Yeah. I say in my notes that I wish I was around on 2chan when this was actually happening, so I could have cheered Molester-san on, because he's just like he's the hero we need.
Yeah, I remember you saying in the Discord chat that he's super moe, and I do agree with that.
Oh, he is so moe. I mean, I was in general saying that, like, neat otaku Japanese boys, I find them extremely moe. I love them, and I want them to call me. If you're watching this and you're a Japanese boy and you are a neat, please contact me.
Yeah, but him in particular, because he does show consistent growth over the course of the story, and Moe is all about that
I
concept
know.
of growth and
Yeah.
being in
I
bloom.
can already
So
see he's starting to open up to different people a little bit. Like I definitely can tell without even like having his backstory. I already know it that he was just a guy just working his job, going to school, and then coming home and decompressing with anime games and shit.
and
But now
steaks.
he's actually interacting with people from different, from like a completely different place that he is, and he's,
Yeah,
it's like
and
a,
that's causing
yeah,
him to grow.
yeah.
Um, so I
I,
have um more notes. I'm just looking through them. Uh, so touching on that, you said he's starting to interact more spontaneously. There's a
mm,
literal quote where it says, "I said spontaneously," and it results in one of the most successful interactions in the story to this point, where the girls start picking out clothes for him.
oh yeah,
And I think the fact that that works out, whereas practically everything he's planned, all his planned discussions have either been somewhat bland or complete failures, is
mm-hmm.
very telling. And the fact that he did it is indicative of the fact that he's growing as a character.
Yeah, he's
And then
learning from his past experience.
and another learning experience, sometimes you say something spontaneous and it doesn't go right? Like he asks the girls if they want to go get ramen, and they say, "No, dude, it's just common sense. You don't ask a girl to go get ramen."
I also like
But
that he mentions that he once read that girls don't like to get ramen unless it's with their boyfriend. Like his mostly his basic understanding of normie girls is from shit he read online, probably.
Yeah, it's all secondhand or third-hand information.
Mm-hmm.
but now that he's actually in that scenario, no one really cares that he suggested it. They just sort of find it kind of funny, and everyone moves on. So
Mm-hmm.
you might say something spontaneous, and it might go over poorly, but who cares really, right?
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
like it's not that big of a deal. It's not the end of the world. No one's gonna flip out on him.
And I'm sure in his mind, this is me projecting,
Mm-hmm.
um, he was the kind of person that beforehand thought that if he said the wrong thing, it would end in fucking disaster, right? And you
Yeah.
see this
Mm-hmm.
with these massive mood swings that he has in his head. As I said, doesn't really express them outwardly. Whenever he says something wrong, it's this panel of complete art shift of him going, "Fucking no,"
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
being in complete disarray when ultimately everything is fine and everything works out. And I think he's starting to realize that it's okay to fuck up sometimes.
Oh yeah, that's definitely like something that I have learned through my social anxiety is that like I spend so much time planning what I'm gonna say and worrying about what will happen. And sometimes I just won't say anything at all, just so nothing will happen, because I'd rather have nothing happen than something bad would happen. But then, sometimes I have
And
to, and I'll say it, and even if it isn't the way I wanted it to go, it's not that bad, actually. And,
all right.
you can find
And
comfort in that failure because now you
I
know
think
what to do.
yeah, and I think we've sort of worked our way through the plot, gradually talking about each event. That's how I took these notes, so that's how I plan to work. We're right at the end now. Kansai is staying the night with him, making sure that he's okay after he was turned down. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of ironic that he's depressed because his grand plan to get with misunderstanding has gone awry. But it's an unplanned event. The fact that he loses his keys, that eventually
Mm-hmm.
results in his relationship with Kansai becoming stronger, and then having a deeper bond forged. It results in this grand gesture, like I was saying, those don't comprise a relationship, but sometimes they can be meaningful, right? His grand gestures that he was trying to push on misunderstanding were planned and purposeful. They were serving a purpose of deepening their relationship, right? It didn't just come from him. He wanted something out of them. Whereas this gesture from Kansai is spontaneous. It's sort of symbolic of their relationship, right? And as a result, it feels to me much more meaningful than anything he's done for misunderstanding to this point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I thought that was actually pretty cute. Like, I like to say that this is the most not anime. Like, in an anime, this would be like completely different than, it's like having a anime type situation, but it happening in real life and it working like it would in real life. And I really like that about this manga.
It's like a deconstruction of anime.
But it actually happened.
Except not.
That, by the way, is going to keep coming up. The idea that you have these big, grand anime moments that result in something completely unexpected. We have these moments later on in the manga where he's running through the snow to get to her house.
Oh my
God.
God.
He knocks on the door, and she's not there. She's not home. Sometimes, she's not home.
Mm-hmm.
That's how life works. And I think that's a good point to wrap things up on. Next week.
Yeah.
Next week, are we going to take this 5 chapters at a time?
Yeah, I like that.
Probably.
All right, so next week we're going to be reading through to chapter 10. I've been Jacob.
Yeah, for those who want to read along with us.
And I will see you next week.
Till next week.
Yeah,
next week.
Goodbye or whatever.
Bye.
Bye.
Neat boys, please contact me!